July 25th, 2012, Olympia Planning Commission meeting. Roll call, please, Tom.
Here.
Larry Levine. Here. Ron Parker.
Here. Seats for you.
James Reddick.
Here. Of course, you probably need one.
Present. Thank you. Let the record reflect all commissioners here this evening. Commissioners, we have an agenda before us. Are there any additions or corrections? I have a couple things I'd like to add, but I want to hear from the board this evening. One of the items I'd like to have essentially would be after the conclusion of receiving testimony this evening. So it will be essentially between items number 3 and 4. Just a quick update from staff regarding the role of the supplemental EIS on the comprehensive plan. Just to give the commissioners a briefing about, not a long briefing, but the distinction between the comment period on the EIS and the comprehensive plan. So I'd like to add that. And again, it will be after testimony has concluded from the public. Under reports, which is item number 5, I would like to add, as we talked about Monday, a letter that came from comprehensive plan subcommittee members. Commissioner Parker and England have a letter that they would like to submit to Councilman Langer. So I want to get a chance for commissioners to talk about that. We still have some energy at that time, so that'll be under reports. So that's all I have, but I would like to have that, those amendments added on to that if I could.
Move to approve the agenda as amended. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstained? Thank you, commissioners. Amy, do you have any announcements this evening? Any other staff members? Commissioners, any announcements? Commissioner Levine.
I was already married last time. Many folks in the community know that the Squaxin Island Tribe is hosting the Tree Journey, an amazing event on the Squaxin Island Reservation. This weekend there is a day of landing event at the Port of Olympia. That is, if I'm not getting this wrong, the 29th. I think that's this Sunday. And approximately 1 p.m. And there will be a ceremony there. And there's, and I'm just making sure I have more information here. If folks in the audience or fellow engineers would like to see that, I can share that this Sunday.
Thank you. I think there's actually a display out in the lobby as well, so I think there's some flyers and some takeaways, and definitely contact Jenny Fulton and Jones at the Port of Olympia. They're still looking for volunteers, and I'm part of the parking crew at 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., so it's going to be a full day there at the port. So don't hesitate to contact if you'd still like to participate or attend. Any other announcements, commissioners? I've got one that pertains to schedule. I would like to announce, so that we can get that in front of the community this evening, that the public hearing for the Trillium Comp Plan Amendment, the commissioners, we were essentially going to have that public hearing on August 6th. That has now been rescheduled to August 20th. The applicant has asked for additional time to address essentially the document and the SEPA, the environmental review associated with the comp plan amendment, and that certainly also works with, I think, the current staff schedule and bringing staff on board. So if you're, we'll get a new schedule out, but again, that won't occur on August 6th. That might leave up some other times that were available on our agenda, and then again, that hearing will occur on August 20th. So just to keep you up to date, it's an ever-moving schedule for the commission this year. I don't have any other announcements. This is the point on our agenda for public communications, and essentially it's for items that aren't before the commission, and we really have one item this evening, which is the update to the comprehensive plan and the public hearing. But is there anybody in the audience that would like to address the commission on another issue, if you will, that doesn't pertain to the comprehensive plan? Hearing and seeing none, I'll continue. As I said, tonight's main objective is to conduct essentially what is the second of, we had our first evening of public testimony on Monday. Tonight is the second hearing. If at the end of the hearing we still need to continue the hearing until tomorrow, we will conduct that. If we're able to receive oral testimony and conclude the hearing tonight, we will do so. There are a couple of housekeeping things that I'd like to bring to your attention. When I call your name, I apologize if I don't enunciate correctly, and be patient with me. When you come up to the mic, if you could give your name and address for the record, that helps us. You're certainly signing in as well, and that becomes part of the public record. I will go through that sheet, and even if you indicated no, I am going to ask if perhaps you changed your mind. So I just think that's an opportunity that maybe something has been said and now you feel you'd like to testify. When we get through the process, I'll ask the folks in the audience, is anybody who hasn't had a chance to participate? If you feel more comfortable sitting at the table, please do so. Just pull the microphone in front of you, or we certainly have the dais. So whatever is most comfortable for you this evening. Again, the Planning Commission is conducting a new process for this comprehensive plan update. It's more, what I'd say, iterative. After your testimony, I'm going to ask commissioners if they have any questions for you to maybe perhaps clarify something you said. Certainly not to sway the testimony you've given, but just to clarify any statements that may be needed. So just pause for a second while I ask commissioners if they have a question, and we'll let that flow there, and there may be a chance that you could assist us in getting through this as well. A couple of other things that I want to say, and you may have talked with staff when you came in. We found out that over the weekend there was a notice put out essentially that tonight's meeting was regarding the Shoreline Master Program. That is not the intent of this evening's meeting. This is on the comprehensive plan update. I apologize for any confusion. This was not a notice given by the City of Olympia. Personally, I don't know who issued this notice or what group or individual, but it's unfortunate because it created a little bit of confusion. If you're interested in the Shoreline Master Program process, the council will begin that Saturday morning at 8:30 at the Olympia Center, and will be beginning their process for updating the SMP. The Commission concluded its review and recommendation in March on the SMP. So again, I apologize for any confusion. It certainly doesn't mean you can't testify on issues that may pertain to shoreline issues with respect to the comprehensive plan. We certainly want to hear from you on that. As I said, we're kind of having a different process for the comp plan update. One is that if you're a single individual and testifying, there's an option for you to come up and testify individually for a 10-minute time frame. We will have a timer this evening, so it kind of helps us move the process along, and then also help you be able to articulate your issues. If you're in a panel of 2 or 4, there's a 15-minute time frame that's allowed for the panel. So just to let you know, we've got staff, and I think most of us have been familiar with the council process, and the timer will give you an initial indication of a certain number of seconds that are left, and then hopefully to conclude your testimony. If you have something to hand out for the commission prior to essentially a letter or something like that, please hand that to Commissioner Parker, and he can pass it on down the line here, and we'll make sure that staff receives a copy that's part of the formal record as well. One of the things that has occurred is we've been getting, I know myself, I think Commissioner Parker and other commissioners as well have been receiving emails from the community. All of those emails are being forwarded on to the staff. If they haven't been included in the initial submittal, they're part of the public record. All commissioners will receive copies of that. So rest assured, if you've sent documents, they're getting compiled. The staff is going to be working very hard Friday evening, getting everything ready for the commission, and as we begin essentially a 4-month iterative communication process and deliberations. The Commission's tentative schedule is to hold the final public hearing on October 29th. That's just essentially what's in our charter and what's in our work program. So we hope that you'll be with us over the next couple of months as we go through this process. One other thing is if you've got a cell phone or a BlackBerry on you, please put that to hum or turn off. In that sense, I just appreciate that. They're lovely ringtones nowadays, but it could be a little bit distracting. Well, I think I've got through all my housekeeping. So what I'd like to do is open the public hearing again for Wednesday, July 25th. This is, again, continued discussion and deliberation, not deliberation, excuse me, receiving testimony from the community on the update to the comprehensive plan. The first person I have on the list is Dennis Bloom. Thank you, Dennis. So if you would just come up, again, if you're comfortable at the table or standing, whatever works for you this evening. Any choice. Well, you can pick any one of those, sir. Yeah. Yeah, we just want to make sure those microphones are on, so we'll give a quick test to those. And Dennis, again, name and address for the record and stuff.
Is that working? Is that better? That should be closer. Is that better?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Town Commission. My name is Dennis Bloom. I'm Planning Manager at Interstate Transit, and the address is Post Office 5659, Olympia, Washington, 98507. If I get a little soft, remind me to speak up a little bit. I prepared some remarks, and I'll probably be reading from those. So go through this somewhat quickly. The first one is that the City Council, the Planning Commission, and the City staff have certainly provided opportunities to involve the public over the past few years and to encourage those interested to directly participate in the comp plan update. And many of you, the City staff in particular, should be commended for these efforts. It's been an interesting process to see and to be a part of as well. The two elements of the comp plan that I want to address this evening are the transportation and land use urban design sections. Interstate Transit submitted a number of specific comments to the city on the transportation section of the April draft and provides specific details about the land use design sections at public meetings and at in-house staff reviews. And I'm pleased to see that many of those are actually incorporated in the current draft. Of note, I would like to reiterate Interstate Transit's support in principle and the elements of the transportation mobility strategy efforts that the City Council approved in 2009. Many are now incorporated into the current comp plan draft, and I should mention, for full disclosure, I was one of the technical staff persons on that committee, that subcommittee that the City Council had approved, and whose recommendations are now carried forward to the draft. These strategies suggest land use changes that support building density along certain corridors. It also anticipates higher quality transit service. This includes land use for proximity improvements near the corridor that will allow and encourage people to walk, bike, or maybe are disabled to safely reach these corridors in order to utilize transit. In addition, passenger amenities that provide shelter from the elements and improve safety and accessibility for riders, as well as for the bus operation, will be included. In turn, the city would anticipate enhanced transit service in the form of more frequent fixed route service and follow land use codes allowing these types of developments to occur. In practical terms, there is still a way to go. There still is a bit of a way to go through working out particulars of such an effort. Interstate Transit, as a public agency, relies on local sales tax revenues to support service throughout our whole service district, and as such, service exists based on those revenues being maintained. Bus fares by themselves do not generate the operational economics for the system. So a healthy economy goes a long way to making service sustainable. In addition, by board policy, consideration of service changes affecting 15% of any given route requires public review. So this also includes now includes environmental justice review that the federal government requires us to do. This considers potential impacts at the economic and community level so that service is equitably considered. And ultimately, the transit authority has the final say in what gets approved. So there's a need to work through the particulars of how something like a community transit network, as suggested by the sustainability mobility strategies effort, might come together, including how the cost of such service will be covered and maintained. And as a reminder, and as for the remainder of the transportation land use design sections, I'd like to point out a number of items. So I'll go through these fairly quickly. I think complete streets is a good and workable solution. However, operational consideration, transit buses that are 30 to 40 feet long, being somewhere between 10 and 10.5 wide travel lanes. Generally, we try to have far-side intersection bus stops, and adding bike lanes and appropriate corner radius dimensions for turning movements needs to be kept in mind. We've had some instances in our service district where a new pedestrian corner bulb out have unintentionally made a turning bus at that street no longer possible. So as more and more jurisdictions are doing this, we're finding it sometimes difficult to maintain the existing route. I would also point out that residential density indicators, like the number of housing units per acre, can be an insufficient indicator of transit-supported land use. There are any number of discussions going on in the transportation land use world these days, and the appropriate density needed for transit service. But in general terms, the diversity of uses along a corridor and their proximity to the corridor, which incorporates good design, limits parking supply, and provides a network of street connectivity, including sidewalks, crosswalks, bike paths, are better indicators for what will help sustain transit route. The third item, guiding transit-dependent land use to locate along transit routes is equally important, such as schools, public services, major employers, and senior and multifamily housing. In particular, there is a recognition that within the draft plan that the future of Olympia becoming more urban will also face an aging population, and in turn, this will influence the transportation options available to the public. One item in the transportation section, GT18, is the specific one I think needs to be clarified and deals with high capacity transportation. There's a reference to developing the land use associated with high capacity transit planning. I believe what it really meant was transportation planning, not transit planning. I would also note that the notion of future rail stations within that section within Olympia might be more cart before horse, since previous work at the regional level makes it clear that more analysis will be needed before a real vision of what that might mean can be considered. And finally, the last item, transit routes are also multi-jurisdictional. City limits don't dictate the level of service of a route. Instead, there's a complexity of who, what, where, and when to service along the street, which is influenced like housing density, employment, and commercial centers, which can also be major trip generators. The point is, we would encourage interjurisdictional coordination of land use efforts along specific sets of corridors to improve service efficiency, including traffic control rights, traffic mitigation impacts, and land use development. So I want to thank you again for the opportunity. Glad to answer any questions. We've got a couple more minutes left. Glad to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Powell? Commissioner Parker?
You will be submitting that in written form or PDF?
Tonight's? Yes, I can do that. We've actually sent in pages of notes on the previous draft.
Again, thank you, Commissioner Parker. Excellent question in the sense of if you don't have something ready to hand in this evening, essentially the ability to submit documents will close Friday, the 27th at 5 p.m. And again, it won't be the last time that we'll certainly be hearing from the community, but for this phase of the public record, that will end. So thank you, Commissioner Parker. Any other questions for Mr. Bloom? Thank you, sir. Next person is Sarah Black.
Well, I don't have notes prepared quite like that, so I will indulge me. My name is Sarah Black. I'm a Senior Transportation Planner with Thurston Regional Planning Council, the Council of Governments for Thurston County. The address is 2424 Heritage Court Southwest, and Olympia on the west side. And I am here tonight. I have a marked up copy of the most current draft, and I will leave that with you, but I'll just preface it with my comments here. And tonight I'm going to talk to you about urban corridors, land use, system efficiency, and geometric design and stuff. But I'm going to start it off talking with you about multimodalism. I'll just say, as a regional transportation planner, I was really pleased to see the efforts to develop a transportation element that was very multimodally focused. For people who aren't familiar with that, the notion of providing for the movement of people more so than vehicles. Really appreciate that, the emphasis on bicycle and pedestrian access and transit. One of the things I was wanting to see that I didn't see was a bit more specificity. I think that the vision, the aspirations are laudable and really worthy. But we've spent about 20 years now trying to do a lot of this, and so I think we're moving to a place where it's beyond just encouraging, that we are needing to get into some nitty-gritty details, if for no other reason than to set realistic public expectations. The concepts that are espoused in here, the ability to leave the car at home and walk instead of drive, or have frequent transit service instead of drive, is very much dependent on the built form. And there are parts of Olympia in particular, this urban corridor that I'm going to talk to you about, where that is about where biking, or in particular, where transit and walking, where viable can be over time, if we're successful with our land use, can be viable alternatives to driving. I have to say that as I read this, it sort of assumes, it comes across as like a blanket everywhere in the region, or everywhere in the city, we will be able to walk or take transit instead of driving. And frankly, I don't believe that that's true. Most of Southeast Olympia will continue to be auto-oriented. It is primarily single-family residential. Good high-density single-family residential, but it is single-family residential. And that's the danger in relying on land use density as the primary determinant of transit service. We need, I think 20 plus years of experience has proven that we need more than just 7 units per acre, 10 units per acre residential. We need proximity of uses. We need critical mass. And so that's where this notion of an urban corridor comes in. And I understand on Monday night there was some concern about how urban corridors are addressed in here. And I'll say that I feel that with the work that came out of the Regional Urban Corridor Task Force, greater specificity could be included in this. So it's not like what the old high-density corridors were. What we're looking at is trying to create targeted districts on this corridor. And so the folks who live in the Carline area, Governor Stevens' neighborhood, don't really need to worry because that's not low-hanging fruit. The district that City of Olympia has identified is out on Martin Way as a place where we might be able to, if we're lucky, if we work really, really hard and chips fall our way, we might be able to create kind of an environment that's attractive for urban infill and redevelopment, mixed-use urban infill and redevelopment. That's not what's envisioned for Carline right now. Maybe someday, but boy, that is so far beyond this planning horizon. And so I think that greater specificity in here would help to better align that with the regional concept and this notion of linear communities. With that also, as we talk about land use and creating compact, walkable streets, and I reiterate something that Dennis said, is I think we need to be very careful on our intersection geometry. This is sort of a wonky engineering thing, but we can design every single intersection that works great for pedestrians, and they will discourage transit access. They'll also discourage the ability for delivery and service trucks to get in and out. And complete streets that don't serve complete neighborhoods are a huge missed opportunity. So if Archibald Sisters cannot get your goods in, put on the shelves, you don't actually have a mixed-use area. So I think we have to be very careful as we go forward in balancing our desire to create a safe pedestrian environment with the kinds of conditions that are going to be necessary to generate the activities that pedestrians are going to want to be there for. So that's just a real-world challenge that we have to face. The land use, I would like to see in the transportation section, I think it would be beneficial to everybody if the land use wasn't treated as a silo issue and instead was reflected throughout, that we are, as we talk about pedestrian orientation and what it takes, to support transit and walking, in particular transit and walking, that we are talking not just about bike lanes and sidewalks, but that we're talking about the land use that will actually generate the trips. So again, I come back to this notion that for the folks who live out, let's say, in wilderness, the notion that they're going to be able to leave their car behind and walk to do a lot of their trips is not realistic. On the Martin Way corridor or downtown or Capitol Boulevard, it is. And I think that the greater distinction could be made in the policies to clarify where that makes sense and where a little bit more specificity could provide more realism to the public about what our expectations are about the future, not just my vision. Something that was missing tremendously in here for me was any recognition of the importance of operations and system efficiency. You'll see on my notes I got I'm a little uncomfortable with this notion that somehow we're going to solve congestion. I don't believe that that's actually accurate. I think we're going to increase mobility and access, but solving congestion is not really there. What I say to people is the system that's out here today, the street system that's out here today, is pretty much what we're going to have to work with. We're going to have a few more connections. We're going to have a little bit more widening, but for the most part, the name of the game for the next 20 years is going to be how to use the system that we already have as efficiently as possible, and key to that is operations. And that is not just, it's, you know, what's addressed in here a little bit is transit single priority, which is a wonky term for an operational efficiency for transit, but there are other tools as well, including access management. For example, Olympia has already demonstrated access management in parts of downtown where they restrict left turn movements during certain hours of the day. There may be the need to think about that more seriously at other intersections, in particular ones that impact transit negatively. When a bus sits in a light cycle for 2 or 3 cycles waiting for the cars in front of it to turn left, just to get into the transit center, that's not transit supportive. And I think that it's maybe time to start to talk about some of these access management issues. Signal timing and and signal coordination is another one. So I think it's time to elevate the importance of operations, both in the comprehensive plan, and then so because of that, then increase its priority in terms of internal funding decisions. It's a really important part of making our system work for everybody who uses it, for transit, for biking, for walking, and yes, for drivers who, for the foreseeable future, will continue to be the dominant mode of transportation. One thing that I'd like to suggest, and I don't, it's sort of, we talk a little bit in this section about mitigation fees and what developers pay for and how we expect to mitigate impacts of growth. I'd like to suggest that we broaden the language a little bit so we don't close ourselves off in the future. Some cities are using impact fees to acquire funding for signals and signal timing projects, and when we're not building new capacity, that may be something that we want to enable by the way our comprehensive plan is developed. I think we also maybe want to be able in the future to look at location efficiency. Somebody who's developing single-family residential out in Southeast Olympia where it simply will be auto-oriented. All the sidewalks notwithstanding, it will be auto-oriented. Why should the fees be the same for that development as development that locates on a close-in urban corridor where people actually really have viable alternatives to driving? And so one of the recommendations of the Urban Corridors Task Force is to look at location efficiency in our impact fee structure, and I think you can do that here as well. And finally, I'll just wrap up with saying, in addition to our, the need to look at intersection geometry, for a community that's so committed to mixed-use neighborhoods and communities, I think we have to think seriously about the last mile delivery of goods and services. How does the UPS truck get into these streets? How does that work? And there's no real mention at all of freight. So with that, I will stop, and if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you. And I will leave this copy for you, and we'll be happy to talk and answer any questions if you have.
Thank you, Ms. Blunt. Any questions for Darrell? Commissioners? Commissioner Warren and Commissioner Lee? And basically, I'll make sure that staff has that, and they'll PDF that for all the commissioners. Go ahead.
Thanks, Tara. I appreciate the presentation. With respect to urban corridors, and then you also talked about the transit-oriented zones or districts, are they mutually exclusive, or can you have both?
Oh, I think you have both. I mean, the whole notion of corridor districts, it's if you think of it as like beads on a necklace. Instead of trying to spread urban infill and redevelopment like peanut butter up and down the corridor, where it would take us 75, I'm not kidding, we have many decades worth of capacity on this corridor. It would be decades before we have the land use to support transit. But if we can work to attract it and create magnets in certain districts, then we start getting places that you can connect like a linear community. So I would say these transit districts or corridor districts definitely need to be on our primary transit corridors. They're a wasted opportunity. We try to create them off of this. We've got 15-minute transit service on this corridor, on some of our corridors. And frankly, if this region is ever to be able to consider high-capacity transit in the future, whether it's light rail, bus rapid transit, or anything like that, it is going to be on this corridor. So creating those neighborhood districts on the corridor, they're essential. They're not mutually exclusive at all. They're completely new.
Thank you for coming there. Can you give us an idea of how location efficient impact fee, I guess, rates would be handled or considered at the regional level? I assume you're not just talking about within a jurisdiction, but among jurisdictions.
You're thinking a little bit, we're just getting to that point right now with that work. So, but it was one of the recommendations of that task force was to say, let us collectively as an urban, as a metropolitan community, so Olympia as more, let us explore this and see what that opportunity offers for us. And I would be, overstating if I said I knew that it could be done interjurisdictional.
So we'll see with the next comp plan update.
I hope it happens long before that.
Any other questions for Ms. Blind? Commissioner Horn?
You were talking about areas that are kind of far out in the city and not transit oriented. But I just wanted to add that that doesn't mean that people can't leave their car at home. If we put retail in neighborhood areas where people can walk to and have some kind of, it's not the ideal corridor type development, but it could be effective.
I couldn't agree more. If we can find a way to make neighborhood scale commercial, not just economically viable in these neighborhoods, but also say politically viable. My guess is most of the people here like that concept as long as you're not talking about their neighborhood. So yeah, that absolutely raises the opportunity. And frankly, the emphasis on demand management, which I didn't even get into, you'll see in my comments in here, is very specific to commute trips. But commute trips are only 15 to 20% of our trips. So if we can get small scale, viable commercial development to locate inside of or adjacent to existing neighborhoods, you're absolutely right. It would allow people, some more people, to make trips on foot or bike instead of having to get in a car to drive. Or if they do drive, they're making much, much shorter trips, which is good for greenhouse gas emissions.
Thank you, Sarah.
Who should I leave this with?
Again, we'll make sure that Amy and Stacy get that. All right, thank you. The next two folks are on panel. That's Claudia Kuykendall and Frank Gorecki. So if you just both come up to the table, that'd be great. Thank you.
So my name is Frank Gorecki. I live at 12532 Waddell Creek Court, Southwest of Olympia, Washington, 98512. And I'm the past chair of the Board of Olympia Citizens Advisory Committee. My colleague, Claudia Kuykendall, is the current chair of the Advisory Committee. Around the end of May, the Advisory Committee drafted a letter to the City of Olympia, to the councilman, regarding the comprehensive plan. I looked for that letter on your website and haven't found it, so I'm going to take this opportunity to read the letter to you and enter it into your record. The undersigned members of the Board of Olympia's Citizens Advisory Committee have been following Thurston County Regional Plan for Sustainable Development because the port is a county-wide special purpose district. We've also been following the City of Olympia's comprehensive plan and shoreline master program updates because 3 of the port's business units have substantial operations on the Port Peninsula and are subject to Olympia's jurisdiction. We have 3 significant comments regarding the latter. 1, view corridors. 2, alignment between Olympia's draft comprehensive plan and the draft shoreline master program. And 3, economic development. Many of the proposed view corridors restrict the port's ability to perform all of the functions assigned to it by state law, including marine terminals, marinas, and facilities for economic development. By the way, I believe you allotted us 10 minutes for this, and isn't your...
No, this should be 15 minutes, sir. Oh, okay, I couldn't see the clock there.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
That's 7 minutes.
I was
it's 10 for 2, all right, I think.
Further establishment of view corridors is an unjustified regulatory taking, benefiting some Olympia private property owners with a taxpayer subsidy from the entire county and burdening the port without compensation. Most of the port taxpayers live outside of Olympia and are not benefited or burdened by the proposed view corridors. However, we will have to make up for the adverse consequences to the port, including litigation and stunning economic development, which in turn will reduce the port's ability to repay its bonds and perform its state authorized functions without tax increases. Private cities have changing skylines, not step-ins. The draft comprehensive plan section on the economy recognizes the role of the port of Olympia in Olympia's economy, but it is inconsistent with the draft shoreline master program, which designates East Bay on the Port Peninsula as urban conservancy. The port has already invested in the infrastructure for East Bay to be a mixed-use commercial district after a robust public participation process consistent with the draft Olympia comprehensive plan. If this is changed by the S&P, the non-Olympia taxpayers who support the port will be subsidizing the city of Olympia without any corresponding benefit. Further, the port has already demonstrated its ability to protect Puget Sound by completing the Cascade Pool cleanup and preparing for sea level rise. The S&P should be aligned with the comprehensive plan, and East Bay should remain a mixed-use commercial district under an urban intensity designation. The city should work more closely with the port to attract development to the Port Peninsula, which could provide services for a growing downtown population, something that has the potential to benefit the entire county without disproportionately burdening Olympia taxpayers. Collaboration with other jurisdictions maximizes economic opportunity and funding for regional sustainable development to which the port is made and can make a significant contribution. Further, we support the comments on the port's June 24, 2010 and January 7, 2011 letters to the Olympia Planning Commission, as well as the Department of Ecology's comments on urban conservancy designation for East Bay in its June 6, 2011 letter to the city, and further reiterate our recommendation in support of the urban intensity designation.
My name is Claudia Kuykendall, and I am one of the 13 signatories of the letter that Mr. Gregory just read into the record. I reside at 4203 Amber Court Southeast in the city of Olympia, 98501. I have over 35 years of legal experience preventing litigation between private enterprises, their surrounding communities, and their regulators, including service on the National Environmental Justice Advisory Committee. In my opinion, the view corridors are going to generate litigation from which our local lawyers like me will benefit. However, as a taxpayer, I don't want to fund this litigation. My nightmare is that the City of Olympia and the Port of Olympia will engage in litigation over view corridors or conflicts between the comp plan and the shoreline management program. And as a taxpayer to both jurisdictions, I will be paying the legal costs of both sides. There is an existing legal process for private property owners to preserve views if they want them. They can negotiate view easements. The city should not interfere with this process by imposing view corridors without the consent of those affected. I am also very concerned that the view corridors will restrict the development of solar energy systems within their scope. Questions?
Any questions, Commissioner Moore?
Well, I didn't think I would have a question, but could you explain further the very last thing you said about the solar impacts?
I actually attended a meeting of this planning commission where one of the commissioners expressed concern that the views from the Capitol campus down to the port would be ruined by the installation of solar panels on the roofs of buildings. That's what led me to consider this comment. And as you can see, I'm wearing a t-shirt. I'm an investor in community solar, and I think it has great prospects in the city of Olympia and also within the entire county in terms of sustainable development And because of the comment I heard at this planning commission, I have that concern.
Any other questions, commissioners? All right.
Thank you for hearing us.
And the letter that you submitted was given to Ms. Butler, so we will all get a copy of that.
Yeah, we addressed the letter to the city council at the request of one of the port commissioners, assuming they would provide it to you, but apparently they didn't, so we're doing it directly.
We appreciate that. Thank you very much. Next on the sign-up sheet is Timothy Harris. Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Timothy Harris of the Goodstein Law Group, 501 South G Street, Tacoma. I'm speaking on behalf of the Port of Olympia. I just want to say we really appreciate the availability of staff throughout this process and look forward to continuing to work with staff as this plan evolves. I spoke on Monday, and I want to reiterate again that I really am concerned about the confusion between the Shoreline Master Plan and this comprehensive plan update going on pretty much at the same time. The comprehensive plan update doesn't have to be submitted until 2016, so we do have some time, and I would hope that we could move it more along in a more linear fashion to eliminate confusion. I'm going to submit written comments by the end of the week, every Friday, that are really getting into the nuts and bolts and the legalities of a lot of the sections, particularly the goals and policies and this sort of thing. I'm going to talk a little more generally this evening about some of my points, and the folks that just spoke did a really nice job, and I appreciate the three things that they talked about, the same three things that jumped out at me: view corridors, economic development, and consistency with the Shoreline Master Plan, because they do have to be legally consistent. Now, generally we're concerned about aspects of this comprehensive plan that may stifle economic development in and around Olympia. Specifically, the Port is concerned about any new aspects of the comprehensive plan that limit port activities or the uses to which port activities may be put. We're also concerned about harmony between the Port's plan and the city's vision for port property. To this end, important parts of the comprehensive plan related to the Port's economic development mission have been eliminated from the July 2012 draft. They were in the original draft. And as an aside, the Growth Management Act puts out a roadmap of what comprehensive plans are supposed to look like, and there's a bunch of elements. And I chatted with Todd about this, which is very helpful. He said, well, we don't look at those elements as chapters, and I agree with that sort of legally. But most jurisdictions treat them as chapters. In fact, this jurisdiction just treats them as chapters, and it made it a little more easy to go through and see exactly how the plan meet the requirements and the goals of the growth management when they're treated as chapters. And the way it is now, it requires a bit of sort of thumbing around and looking at different sections. There's some extraneous stuff there that's not called from the Growth Management Act. There's a lot of extraneous stuff there. And there's stuff that is kind of hard to find. And the most obvious example is there's no housing chapter. There's no housing element. I understand it's broken up into different areas. It makes it hard for me to go through and look and see, well, is it adequate? Does it meet the goals and requirements of the Growth Management Act? And in fact, housing is a concern of the Port. There has to be, plenty of affordable housing for folks to ensure an adequate workforce to ensure economic development in the area. Which gets to, we encourage the Planning Commission to come up with a comprehensive plan that ensures jobs, adequate transportation. These are all elements of concern of the Port. The community would also be well served by a comprehensive plan that's clear, predictable, flexible, and directly addresses the goals and frameworks that are set forth in the Growth Management Act. We also urge you to reconsider putting the port-related activities back in that were taken out of the prior draft. We're also concerned many aspects of the new plan limit industrial uses. We look at the new future land use map, for instance, changes and decreases the footprint for industrial uses on the Port Peninsula. And I talked to Todd. I understand the idea that the actual footprint is smaller than it was in the previous draft, and I understand the reasons for doing it. One of the reasons is that it's meant to be a flexible barrier. It's not meant to be set in stone. But the problem is it can shrink, it can get bigger. We'd like to have a little more definition and a little more flexibility to determine for ourselves where port industry may in fact grow, and not as a limit, but to increase flexibility so that the port can meet its mission of fostering economic development for the citizens of Thurston County. There are some other things in here about designations that have changed, designations that limit industrial use, deleting the high-density designation of places and changing light industrial to auto services, for instance. We think limit the flexibility of what can be done with those areas to encourage, again, economic development, not necessarily on the Port Peninsula, but throughout the city. Finally, protecting, preserving, and enhancing views of the Capitol campus, Bud Inlet, downtown skyline, Mount Rainier, the Black Hills, Capitol Lake, the surrounding tree slope, and the Olympic Mountains. Those are all of the aspects that view corridors are meant to protect. Now, you know, we all enjoy being able to see those things, but that's a lot of stuff to ensure that you can see throughout the city. And I would ask that you take another look at it and sort of temper those view corridors with reasonable land use allowances and incorporate the goals of the Growth Management Act having to do with economic development. At a minimum, the draft plan should better define what it means to preserve and protect and enhance views. Because that sounds to me like you can't build, you can't do anything, particularly in the Port Peninsula or anywhere throughout the city if it's going to interfere with the view of one of those fairly many exhaustive list of features of the county. So we appreciate better definition in that. And like I said, we'll be submitting more detailed comments by Friday, and we certainly look forward to continuing to work with the staff and the commission on drafting the final plan. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Harris? Commissioner Lee?
So you mentioned that port-related activities were removed from the...
Yeah, appendix 3A specific. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And you had also said that the limitations on port activities was undesirable. But can you, were those just in relation to the example you gave of the change in zoning?
Changing zoning, view corridors, transportation has an element of it. You mentioned that there was concern about transportation only having freight, for example. Better serve the port. Housing, like I said, has to do with the port because we want to ensure that there's
I'm just trying to better understand if the port-related activities are removed, that implies potentially less limitation of port activities.
Oh, I see what you're saying, but it seems like, right. The thing, that's a great question. I appreciate the clarification. It seems like if they're taking port-related activities out, that they're in fact giving us more flexibility to make our own determinations. And what the stuff that I'm in particular talking about Appendix 3A, which was removed, which talked a lot about the port's mission. And there was a lot of real good language in there about how, what the port does and why it does it and how important it is to the community, the port's mission and its charge, its state charge to foster economic development. And it was an important part of the comprehensive plan before, and it seemed to be, incorporated as part of the economic goal, the economic development goal, as well as the land use goal, and we think it should still retain it. That's it. It was a good question.
If I could follow up on Commissioner Lee's note, when was the last update, and maybe our previous testimony as well? And I think it's the comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements. I'm trying to think of the comprehensive plan for the port. When the last date that was updated, I know it was the one from 1995 that was integrated in the comp. If you could come back up to the point, that'd be great, Frank. I think that's the issue that you're raising. Is it was entitled a port element.
That's right.
So the commissioners approved an update to the scheme of harbor improvements in November of 2011. It's now published on the port website as the 2012 harbor improvements. And it has in there the various capital investment opportunities that are being examined and all the other things that, and not just for the peninsula, but for all of the port, which includes
I can tell you, personally, I'm hoping that we could get a link to that document, perhaps sent to us as well. I would appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll pass it on.
Thank you for the update.
Actually, I was to that on your website, and at the bottom it says additional links. I think that's how it comes.
Thank you very much. I didn't see it right off that. Thank you very much. Any other questions for Mr. Harris? Thank you. Next person on the list, and it's for two people, so a 10-minute allocation, Jim Langenfelder and, Jim was sitting out here earlier, I don't know if it was Jim and Emily. We'll come back, because they did indicate, well, it says no here, so they come back if they want to testify. Next person is Rob Alstreet.
Hey, my name is Rob Olsway, I live at 3726 Wesley Loop Northwest in Olympia. My main concerns are with the Park Art Recreation chapter of the comp plan that you're working on. And I really am only here to question the inclusion of the historic preservation section with the Park Art Recreation chapter. Historic preservation needs to have its own chapter. It has in the past. The history of Olympia is so important to what Olympia is, to who we are, and what we want to become. To hide this important part of the city in the parks chapter seems to me not be acceptable. Reading the chapter, it's clear that the rules of historic preservation has basically been cut and pasted into the staff draft, and that needs to be changed. The work of the Heritage Commission should not be diminished by adding it as a mere footnote to the Park Art and Recreation chapter. We currently have 10 chapters, and it's hard for me to understand why 11 chapters would be too long. I think it's something that is important to the city, has always been important to the city, and I think that needs to be seriously considered. Not that we don't like heritage and park and art, but they deserve to have a chapter. It's more than important to this community. Beyond that, page 8, the 15 pages in the Park Art and the Art chapter, I want to emphasize one of the entries. It's PC 5.6, which speaks to preserving street rights-of-ways which extend to the shoreline. Now, that's important. The city needs to make sure those parcels are secure